I think I just froze there. So I'll just start. I'll just start from scratch again, folk. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest of our series of Meet the Candidates, our election Q&A from the People's Doorstep Referendum. Thank you very much for joining us again. I'm Colin McPherson. Tonight we have Martin Keatings, who is standing as an independent in Midlothian and Fife. Again, a great friend of the International Chat Show, somebody who needs absolutely no introduction from myself. Tonight, as I said yesterday, we will have our blether at the bar after the question and answer session. I will post the link to the Zoom call in the comments after we've gone off air. But first of all, welcome Martin Keatings. Thanks very much for joining us. How are you doing today, mate?
Hi guys. As I said at the start of the call, same rubbish, different day.
Okay, but to get things underway, as we've done on the last two nights, maybe give us a wee sales pitch. Why are you standing? What do you want to achieve if you're elected as a Holyrood MSP?
Well, sales pitch. Wow. I'm not one for selling. I think the body of my work speaks for itself. I've spent 10 years helping people with things like DWP tribunals, DWP paperwork, appeals, that sort of stuff. I'm disabled, but I'm also a full-time carer for my mother who has MS. And obviously the People's Action on Section 30. I was head of Yes International between 2011 and 2014. I've been head of Forward as One since the 2014 referendum till now. My work pretty much speaks for itself. I'm standing for Holyrood for three reasons. One, to push independence. I don't think that needs any explaining which way I lean on that question. Two, to advance the what I would term social justice for unpaid carers in Scotland, who are one of the most unrepresented groups of people in the UK, just not just in Scotland, and just generally to represent my constituents under the one question: does this benefit the people I'm representing? And that's it. And that's one of the benefits of being an independent over being in the party. I'm not subject to a party whip. So every single thing that I look at, I simply look at it through the lens of, is this going to benefit the people in my community? And if it does, I support it. If it doesn't, I say no. As simple as that. I think I've made pretty clear my reasons for standing, but the primary ones are pushing forward with independence. I want to see a vote in the next year, and representation of unpaid carers. So.
Okay. Maybe also at this stage, before we come into the questions from the audience and folk watching, as the last couple of nights, please put your questions into the chat on the Doorstep Referendum page. If you're watching via any other link, I won't see your questions. So into the Doorstep Referendum page on Facebook, put your comments in the chat there and we'll take as many questions as we can. But Martin, there's also the small matter of the Section 30 case. And
yes,
there is meant to be, we're expecting a decision tomorrow, I think.
Yes.
So maybe just take a step back from the election Q&A and give folk a quick update on that for those who maybe haven't seen it.
Well, we're at the appeal stage of the inner house of Court of Session. So we've had the first fight in the outer house of the Court of Session. Now we're in the inner house of the Court of Session. And that was before Lord Carlaway, Lord Menzies and Lords. Oh dear, I have to apologise. I've forgotten the third judge's name. I don't like doing that, but c'est la vie. But yeah, we're now in the highest court in Scotland. The ruling should come down tomorrow, sometime in the morning. We'll probably get an advance copy, and then the public will get to know what's happened thereafter. At that point, it's pragmatic to say that if we lose, we'll hopefully be moving to the next step, which would be to take it to the UK Supreme Court. And I think we can pretty much say if the UK government loses, they'll probably be doing the same. So that's purely pragmatic to say that at this point in time. As for the case itself, for those that don't know what it is quite a simple case in that it is looking to answer the question, is it okay for the Scottish Parliament to legislate for a second referendum on independence without the permission of Westminster? And it's a question that's festered for 22 years. The politicians have been unable to answer it. And so we raised that in the Court of Session here in Scotland way back last year in order to have that question answered. If we can prove that it's legal for the Scottish Parliament to be able to legislate for a referendum without permission, then that automatically makes any bill that's on the table competent and legal to be passed through the Scottish Parliament without permission, like the SNP's draft bill, for instance. The UK government, weirdly, have not actually advanced any argument against our assertion that the Scottish Parliament can legislate for a second referendum. They've spent the entire year simply trying to argue that the ordinary members of the public, like ourselves, don't have the right to even ask that question. So that's what the appeal stages have all been about, is getting over that issue with standing. Obviously, that links into standing for the reason for standing for Holyrood as well. But the be all and the end all of it is the UK government simply don't have any arguments against our position. So what they've done is wasted taxpayers' money and a year worth of time simply trying to stop us from asking the question at all of the court. So we're hoping for a good ruling tomorrow. If not, the fight's not over. It's just beginning. So, but we'll have to see what happens tomorrow. Suffice to say, I'm slightly nerve-wracked. It's literally a year and a half worth of my life that's been consumed with this. So, yeah.
I mean, we do have a question from the audience. I don't know if you actually would want to answer it at this stage in the proceedings, given that you're expecting a judgment or an initial ruling tomorrow. From Bob Mathieson, why do you think that the SNP did not get on board with you in the action?
Oh, I know exactly why the SNP didn't get on board. You can pretty much read through the paperwork and come to the conclusion. In order to answer this question, I do have to preface it with just a little bit of information. Precedent dictates that when you ask a question like this in the Scottish courts, that you should invite any parties that have interest, standing in interest in the case. So we were going up against the UK government, so obviously we summoned them, but at the same time as well, we summoned the Lord Advocate to argue on behalf of the rights, privileges and powers of the Scottish Parliament. And we also separately summoned the Scottish ministers, that is the Scottish government, the SNP government, because their interests are not always the same as Parliament's. So we did that to allow them to come in. And bearing in mind that this case, if we prove that it's legal for the Scottish Parliament to actually legislate for Indy Ref 2 without Westminster's permission, it makes the SNP's bill competent as well. So by opposing it, it's effectively shooting them in the foot. So in the initial stages, from what we can see with the paperwork, is it looks like the SNP simply said to the Lord Advocate, this is not going to go anywhere, you deal with it. So the Lord Advocate was advancing a position for both the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish government. This is one of the quirks of the Scottish legal system. The Lord Advocate is both the head of the criminal and legal side of things for Scotland, but is also a member of the Scottish government, and it often causes a conflict between the two roles. In this case, it looks like the Scottish government says, you just argue for us, and so the Lord Advocate was putting forward positions for the office of Lord Advocate, but also for the Scottish government at the same time. And this is where the magic phrase, it's not for the pursuer to stand in the shoes of parliamentarians, that's where this comes from. It was a position that was advanced on behalf of the SNP Scottish government by the Lord Advocate. So what we think then happened is we started the second fundraiser. And 1/3 of the way into that fundraiser, I said, I believe in the Yes movement. I'm going to go ahead. I have faith that you'll get us over that, that target. and I made quite a public announcement about it. The next day, we started getting panicky emails in, is he really going ahead with it? Is he really going ahead with it? And we think what happened at that point is the Scottish government then read what arguments had been advanced in their name and realised, uh-oh, these are the sort of things that if we were to say, we would end up losing votes from it. So they were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Or this was what it looks like. They were stuck behind a rock and a hard place. And what looks like to have happened is they have dropped out of the case at that point. And the reason they dropped out of the case at that point is because there's a thing called the open record. And this is a combination of all the arguments between the different parties. So we advance an argument and we send it to the other parties. They then respond and their arguments are added to the open record. And that then gets sent back to us. And then we argue against their arguments and we add them to the open record and we send it back to them. And they send it back to us and it goes back and forward. And before you know it, you get a record of every single argument back and forward in numbered paragraphs with ours and then the first defenders and then the second defenders and then our next paragraph and so on. In order for the, shall we say, rather condescending and arrogant arguments that were put forward in their name to be removed from that record, the only way they could do it is by dropping out. The second they drop out, the open record is then rewritten to remove any arguments that were advanced in that person's name. So by dropping out, the Scottish government were able to get things like it's not for the pursuer to stand in the shoes of parliamentarians, bearing in mind that the pursuer in this case is actually 10,000 members of the electorate. So those things were removed from the record at that point because they had withdrawn. Then the Lord Advocate adopted their arguments. And at that point, we spent months saying to the Lord Advocate, who exactly are you representing? Are you representing yourself and the powers and prerogatives of the Scottish Parliament, or are you representing the Scottish government? And for months and months, they just wouldn't tell us. He just would not tell us who he was actually representing. So at that point, we don't know if the Scottish government was involved or if they weren't involved. All we can say is that it looks like the reason that they dropped out, that supposedly they dropped out, was to have certain things that had been advanced in their name removed from the record. Whether they are or they are not involved from that point on is still the open question, because when we asked it at the last hearing, the response we got was from the Lord Advocate is, I'm not a member of the SNP. Yes, but you're a member of the Scottish government, aren't you? So, yeah, that's what it looks like that they dropped out. But unfortunately, it has caused massive issues for us. And considering it proves that their bill is competent, it's really frustrating. It's even more frustrating when they turn around and say, they dare the UK government to take them to court, because if that happens, it's exactly the same argument. It's exactly the same fight, exactly the same question, exactly the same everything. It just double the cost because they're having to do it again. So yeah, it's really, really irritating. But what can you do? Politicians, you can't live with them. You can't shoot them. I hear that's illegal. So
okay. Well, I think on the basis of the action in Section 30, the thing to do is watch this space. I mean, again, see how the ruling goes tomorrow, and I'm quite sure the way no matter how it goes on, whichever direction you end up having to take, I'm quite sure you'll be on our usual Wednesday international chat show when there is something new to report. But this is an election Q&A, so we're going back now to the question specifically on the election and what you would aim to do as an MSP if elected. Question from Kaiser Habib Kadri. How could we encounter opposition parties that independence is our top priority, and how will we get there?
Sorry, can you just repeat that first bit? You just broke up.
How will we encounter opposition parties that independence is our top priority, and how will we get there?
How do we counter the opposition parties in terms of independence? Simple. Call a referendum. Ram the legislation through the Scottish Parliament and call the referendum. Show them that we mean business. Show them that we're in no uncertain terms going ahead with it, and that it's a choice for the Scottish people. It really is that simple, because it is a choice for the Scottish people. And if we have a majority at the Scottish Parliament, especially a super majority, which I very much hope I'll be part of. We put it through for the constitution. We put through the legislation for the constitutional question. Simple as that. And we fight it tooth and nail, and we make it clear that we're doing it because it is our choice, nobody else's. So at that point, if they still haven't woken up, then c'est la vie. But the fact of the matter is that we are in a very dangerous situation at the moment. Independence is necessary for our recovery from COVID. Because if you think that Scotland is even going to be anywhere near the top of the list in terms of Westminster's priorities in post-COVID recovery, think again. We'll be bottom of the list. Simple as that. And our needs will often be sacrificed. Exactly what happened through the Thatcher years in order to appeal to the southeast of England and London City. So we are in a situation where independence is completely 100% necessary for us to be able to recover properly, as is with rejoining, in my view, rejoining the EU as well, whether that be in an EFTA arrangement or whether it be full EU membership. We simply need to do it in order to be able to sustain ourselves. Otherwise, I wouldn't like to be in a post-COVID, post-Brexit Tory UK. Hopefully the opposition parties will see the light. Hopefully they'll come along with us. But what I am confident of is that once we become independent, give it a couple of years and they'll not want to go back to anything else. Just like the other 50 nations that have left the great British Empire. Not one of them has ever asked to come back. It just is. And I actually think, likes of Labour as well, I will say Labour, I actually think it affords them the opportunity to become the party they should have been all along, because they've drifted away from the founding principles, one of which was home rule for Scotland. And I think that after independence, I think they would really have an opportunity to thrive as a party and certainly go back to the root policies that they were originally founded for, more left-wing, more socially just policies as well. So it might be a good thing for them.
Follow up from me on the topic of the referendum. We have seen our favourite linesman Douglas Ross threatening that he might try to get folk to boycott any referendum. He's moved away a wee bit over the last few weeks from talking about it being illegal and wildcat. Now it's just irresponsible, seems from the current description the Tories like to use. Depending on, assuming that we don't get a Section 30 order, and either the courts have agreed that we don't need one, or alternatively, maybe the Scottish Parliament decides to go ahead anyway on the basis of a supermajority. How concerned would you be about unionists boycotting that referendum?
Well, my position on this has been pretty well known and pretty clear, and especially in light of the case, the People's Action on Section 30, the case that I'm currently doing at the moment. If the court says it's lawful, period. The right to vote is just that, a right to vote. And within that right to vote is also the right not to vote. So as far as I'm concerned, any unionist that chooses not to turn up at the ballot box or decides to boycott it, where it has been clearly spelled out that the vote is lawful, well, they're simply exercising their right not to vote. And their vote, yes, their vote will simply be, their boycott will simply be counted as an abstention. Simple as that. That they are neither for nor against it. So that if the court says it's lawful, it is lawful, period. It is the job of Parliament to create laws. It is the job of the courts as masters of law to interpret law. That is the split. That is the division. Parliamentarians can't interpret law and the courts can't make laws. They're two sides of, two opposite sides of the same coin. One creates laws, one interprets them. And only the courts can say if something is lawful or unlawful. In this case, if they say it's lawful, it is lawful. No politician, I don't care what they say, it doesn't matter. If the court says it's lawful, it's lawful. And if it's lawful, then any vote or not voting, as the case may be, Not voting would simply be classified as an abstention, just as it would be in a general election or a Scottish election or a council election, period.
Okay, thank you. Question now for Nancy McIver. I believe still your cover girl on your Twitter account, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Hi, Nancy. Nancy's, hi, Martin. If elected, how soon will you push for independence and when do you think it should be?
5th of May, 2022. Same day as the council elections. That covers the whole safety issues with COVID-19, because if it's fine to have an election, it's fine to add another ballot to the box, so to speak. So my preference would be to get the legislation through as soon as Parliament starts. Again, within the sort of the following 6 months of Parliament reopening, and for the vote to occur on the 5th of May, 2022.
Right. Okay, that's a very succinct timetable. Arthur McMillan, you ask what the Independent Party actually means. Martin isn't the member of the Independent Party. Martin is standing as an independent candidate, just for clarification there. Just trying to scroll through. I've lost the thread suddenly. Sorry about that. Too many folks saying hello to each other. I can't even see the questions. But maybe again, you were saying, Martin, earlier, you think it's very important that an independent Scotland rejoins EU or EFTA at least at the earliest possibility. Now, again, we were speaking about this before we came on air. There was an open letter signed by, I think it's over 170 folk from across Europe, including in Scotland, but also across the rest of the EU, calling on the European Union to welcome back an independent Scotland with open arms. An open letter I actually also put my name to. How important do you think that this will be, maybe especially as of next week, with the supermajority at Holyrood seeing more and more positive vibes from Europe towards Scottish independence?
Well, since 2016, I've actually actively been petitioning the European Parliament for accelerated re-entry to the European Union if Scotland becomes independent. It was actually one of the largest recognised petitions in the history of the European Parliament. And in terms of the response has been brilliant. One thing that we've never actually experienced in Scotland is the European Union. And that might sound really weird to say that, but it's the truth. Every benefit that Scotland could have derived from being a member of the European Union was either stolen or it was traded away by Westminster for benefits for London. So we've been in a situation where a lot of the grants and a lot of the funding that Scotland would have got is being usurped by Westminster as per usual. They screwed us on the way into the European Union and they screwed us on the way back out again. So in terms of rejoining the European Union, Scotland would derive benefits that it's never seen before because we've not been afforded those benefits which we should have had because of Westminster yet again. I think in terms of rejoining the EU, it has to be a priority for a trading relationship. And that's I'm going to put my hands up here and say that is my view. I'm a Europhile. I'm very much supportive of the European Union. And I understand that not everybody thinks that way. Not everybody supports the European Union or would rather see an EFTA arrangement. For me, EFTA is not really on the table because what's the point in being part of the club if you can't have a say in how it's run? You know what I mean? That's the downside to EFTA. But the European Union, it's a remarkable thing, but we've just never really seen the benefits of it. So in terms of letters like the 170 letter that's been written and other statements that have been made by the EU, and by EU citizens and such letters, you know, like we'll leave a light on for you, and they all help because they show the Scottish population that the propaganda they're being subjected to by the media about Europe being hostile towards Scotland is a load of guff. That's the only way to put it. It is a load of utter guff. We're not tarred with the European Union has had a very it's had a very unique impression of Scotland, because we have a different legal system, and because we have a different ecclesiastical system, and because we have a lot of things that are devolved, but mostly because of our different legal system. Scotland has had to make direct provisions for European law in Scottish law. It's not simply been a case of UK doing it for us. So most of the things we have already match it. Match European standards, and because we have a separate legal system from the rest of the UK, Scotland's legal system on its own is recognised by Europe. A lot of the precedents that are in Scottish courts are used in Europe, and vice versa. So we have a very close relationship, but I don't think that the perception here in Scotland is that people feel that we're really wanted by the European Union. So when I see things like this, it's great because it offsets the propaganda of the problem child neighbour that keeps telling us that we're useless and that we'll never be able to rejoin and we'll have to do this and we'll have to do that. I would like to see more of it. I would. It might be an imposition for the EU, but I would like to see more of that sort of, yes, you would be welcome, yes, you would be welcome, yes, you would be welcome, because this issue may very well decide the result of independence for Scotland, and subsequently our membership of the European Union. I don't think the European Union members as a whole realise exactly how much of an effect a positive response to Scotland's potential future membership would have in terms of Scotland's psyche. And especially moving towards independence to then move towards rejoining the European Union as well. So I would like to see more of it. But it is certainly helpful, especially in the run-up to an election, that's for sure.
And again, I mean, this is something obviously that, again, over the last however many years, Germans for Independence have been very, very keen on showing this support. And the one thing that I do see is that folk in Scotland, they see things on Twitter and Facebook, they see various events or days of action that we do. And it really means something to folk in Scotland that folk in Germany are actually doing something. Now, obviously, I'm heavily involved in all of these things. But for example, you mentioned the Leave a Light On for Scotland just over a year ago when the UK left the EU and Scotland was dragged out the EU. I think we had about 20 photos from right across Germany that we were posting on Twitter. And there was only one or two of those were actually Scots. Most of them were normal, run-of-the-mill Germans. And that, I think, is something that we have to highlight. It's not just myself being a Scotsman in exile and saying, oh, I go for it, Scotland. We've got folk in Germany on our side. The same when we did our event in Straubing again last year as we were dragged out. We had two Scots came up from near Munich to take part. The rest of the folk taking part were Germans. It was the German local media that were covering it because they're saying, this is something big that's happening. So again, I think this is something that we're going to, all of us need to build on over the coming months. Question from the audience again from Lynn Miller. How are you persuading the voters in mid-Scotland and Fife that there are enough list votes to go around between yourself and Alapa to return both yourself and Alapa to Holyrood?
To return both of us to Alpa. Well, it's a proportional. It's a game of proportions. So as you get your first seat, if you're a party, as you get your first seat, getting your second seat's harder, and your third seat's harder than that, and your fourth seat's harder than that. There are 120,000 SNP voters in mid-Scotland and Fife. Out of those 120,000, there would need the Scottish National Party would need an additional 46,000 minimum in order just to get one single seat. So SNP is pretty much off of the cards here completely. Your next party that might have a chance. You have is the Greens or Alba. The Greens got 1 seat in the last election, so now we're talking it's going to get exponentially harder for them as they go to the second and third seat. Alba, based on what the vote intention, from what I saw from the Savannah Comrades poll this afternoon, are going to struggle in Mid Scotland and Fife based on what the polling intentions are. They may get 1 seat, possibly at a stretch 2 seats, but anything above that is going to be wasted. So it's not a case of convincing people that there's enough votes to go around. It's simply a case of the ones that are not going to vote for Alba, of which there are many, convincing them to place their vote with myself. And I would sincerely hope they do that. If every yes voter, in Mid Scotland and Fife was to transfer their vote, between the two, then they would get 2 in. I would get elected as well if every yes voter in this area split their votes. But that's going to happen organically anyway. And that's going to happen organically because of this constant spat between Alba and SNP. There are SNP voters that will simply not vote for Alba candidates based on arguments that are ongoing. I'm not going to get involved in those arguments. I've stayed well out of them. But we all know what the arguments are. There are SNP members will not vote for Alba. Simple as that. So the question then becomes, the vote is wasted on SNP because the SNP cannot get any seats in this area. It's just a mathematical impossibility. So really the toss-up is between the Greens and myself. And the irony here is that if all those that voted Green in the last election voted it again, Mark would probably still get in. But it's a toss-up. It's really a case of personal choice. That's what it boils down to. There is no way that every SNP voter is going to vote for Alba. It's just not going to happen. So what I'm trying to do is stand at the back of them and hoover up the ones that that they won't be able to get, both through philosophy, philosophical differences, but also ones that see the message that I'm trying to put forward and agree with it more than what Alba's putting forward. So we'll just have to see what happens. But the number of votes that I would take off Alba would be insignificant because it's just the different philosophies. The number of votes that they could get, so that I would take off them to inhibit them, would be is just insignificant.
At one stage in your campaign, you were advocating a household recommendation. Are you still doing that?
Of course, yeah. For those that are torn between who should I vote for, if they're not going to vote for Alba, they're not going to vote for Alba. As simple as that. So please give me your vote. If, however, you're in a household where everybody's whether or not should I vote for him or should I vote for Alba, then simply give me the first vote in your household and give the rest to Alba or the Greens. I will stress, and I need to make this clear to everybody, I was not advocating specifically for Alba. I'm advocating for all pro-independence candidates. So if you're swithering and you're undecided, please consider giving me the first vote in your household and then cast your vote for other pro-independence candidates, whether that be the Greens or whether that be Alba. That is entirely up to yourself. But that's what I'm advocating for. That's the line that I'm advocating for.
Okay. And maybe at this stage, some very important clarification. Martin, now you were talking about the first vote in your household. Obviously, you mean the one person votes for you on the regional list, because I've seen some confusion on social media as well, that some folk think this might be a preferential voting system like we know in council elections. Remember, when you do vote next Thursday, or by post if you're doing it beforehand, on the regional ballot, you have one vote for one party or for one independent candidate. If you start marking various candidates and say Martin Keatings 1, Alpa 2, or whatever, you will have a spoilt ballot and your vote will not count. So please remember, on the ballot it is one cross for one list of your choice.
Unless you're a unionist, in which case you list them in order, you put numbers next to them.
And then make sure
you
vote till you balk, and make sure you put SNP at 37 or whatever. I don't know how many how many are on the list in Mid-Scotland and Fife.
And then, of course, we all know that because of the COVID-19 situation, that the nationalists are casting their vote on one day and the unionists are casting it on the next.
Aye, Fridays for the unionists, I believe. Okay, question from the audience again. Keith Brown. Martin, what do you think of the Scottish deficit accusations coming from Westminster? Did you catch that?
Sorry, froze up there.
What do you think of the Scottish deficit accusations coming from Westminster?
Which one in particular?
Well, it was plural.
What, in general?
Aye.
Well, Scotland's going to have a deficit, but then again, every Western country in the world has a deficit. It's normal for a country to run a deficit. The question is it going to be overly cumbersome for the Scottish economy? And the answer for us is no. Yes, it might be slightly higher than it needs to be when we first become independent, but it's not something that you have to remember that we're in a situation whereby Scotland's wealth is being divvied up amongst 64 million people rather than 5.5 million people. It's proportional. So when you take that sum that because Scotland contributes more to the UK than it gets back. So on day one, we're going to have more money than we currently have. That's just the fact. We're going to have more coming in than we currently have. That's just basic maths. The question is the deficit overly cumbersome? Is it going to affect us? And the answer to that is, well, no. We're the 5th richest nation per head capita in the world, according to the OECD. And I think it's, if I last protocol, I think it's 6th as marked by the European Union. Don't quote me on those figures. But in any case, Scotland's one of the richest nations on the planet per head capita. So we're going to have no problem. But it is normal. It is perfectly normal for for countries to run a deficit, and to kowtow to these deficit myths that Westminster keeps putting forward is to turn around and say that Scotland is incapable of doing things that the other 196 countries on this planet have been doing for God knows however many years. Some of them do it successfully, some of them don't. But for ourselves, we're in a position where we are a rich, small nation. And as we saw after the 2008 banking collapse, the countries that responded and were able to adapt and recover from deficits as a result of that banking collapse were the small, agile nations: Iceland, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. You know, it was the smaller nations that were able to recover much faster than the bigger cumbersome ones like the United Kingdom. So deficit myths, I have no time for them. Scotland is a wealthy nation. Scotland could quite easily handle a deficit, no problem whatsoever. Yes, it might be slightly higher than we want when we first start, but the point here is we'll have control over how we deal with that deficit, which means that we won't be putting out expenditure for things we don't need, and instead we'll be able to use those revenues to tackle the things that we should be tackling that other people aren't. You know, for instance, we'll be able to, invest in 1 or 2 apprenticeships rather than, decorating the house of a certain prime minister. We have priorities in Scotland. Trident, perfect example. HS2, another example. London Crossrail, the London sewage network. All of these are things.
Is that what comes out of Boris Johnson's mouth?
No,
the London sewage network.
No, I mean the upgrade to the London sewage network, the real one. No, the one that looks like it's dressed like an alpaca. So these are all projects that we've actually had some part in investing. Refurbishing Westminster Abbey, but we derive no benefit from them. So these are all things that the money could be better spent on, like, reducing the deficit, for instance. But yeah, I think it's complete nonsense what's coming out of Westminster. Every country in the West, bar a few, have a deficit, run a deficit. It is normal, especially in a time like this. But it's not having the deficit that's the issue. It's how you react to it and how you how you pay it down or how you do it. Westminster is all about the austerity, but there are other models that have been much more successful and do a damn sight less damage to the people while they're doing it. We have that opportunity, but we'll only have that opportunity with independence. So yeah, we'll run a bit slight deficit when we're independent, but 5-6 years down the road, the question will be, what deficit?
Right. Maybe looking forward now a bit more to, again, if you get elected next Thursday, I think it's probably fair to say if you get elected as an independent in Mid-Scotland and Fife, there's a chance that other pro-independence parties that are not SNP will have also taken some of the pro-independence vote across the country. And so we might well be looking at this supermajority. Again, we might not. You might be the only independent elected. That's also happened before. But going into the next parliament, how do you see this supermajority working? Do you see, for example, a majority SNP government working with other pro-independence parties within Holyrood?
Do I see it? It's a hard one. I tend to be an optimist. So I wouldn't like to do the old glass, the glass ball, oil, boil, and toil and trouble, looking into the future. But what I would say, and it's more of a comment, is that when you're elected to Parliament, it doesn't matter if you're SNP or if you are ALBA or if you are an independent like myself, you have a duty to work with the people across the aisle. It's just what you were elected to do, is to work with other people for the benefit of your nation. So I would caution anybody that is seeking election to Parliament that is unwilling to work with other people. That's not what the Parliament was intended to be. It was intended to be a place for robust debate, yes, but not personal attacks. It was a place to deal with the needs and the wants of the people of Scotland. And for my part, if elected to Holyrood, I will be seeking to work with anybody. I don't care what colour their stripes are. If they come to me and they say, I have this policy and it will benefit your constituents, I will look at it based on the facts and the figures and the information contained therein, but I will not simply cast it aside because of the colour of a person's rosette in the previous election. And if it benefits my constituents, I'll vote for it. If it doesn't, I'll tell them why I'm rejecting it. Simple as that. And I would hope that that would be the same spirit that candidates on any side of the Parliament's chamber that's the position that they would work from. Will it happen? I don't know, but I certainly hope it will. Right now, it's hope that it will happen like that. If not, the good thing about being an independent is you're not subjected to the whip, so I can knock their heads together at the same time. You can give praise and knock their heads together in equal proportion. So if I have to be a referee and call out inappropriate conduct, then fair enough, I will. But I would hope that they would see the shared campaign that we all have. They would see the constitutional future that we have, and that by not working together, they're simply pissing it up the wall. And I would hope that any animosity or any grievances that have built up would be cast aside for the benefit of the people of Scotland. And that's the position I'll be working from. But apart from that, we'll see what happens. So,
I mean, again, you say it's not a crystal ball, but again, it's also a potential scenario that we could be seeing, because if we've been following the campaign so far for the major parties, Anas Sawa has been very, very clear throughout that he's looking to go beyond constitutional arguments and work for the whole of Scotland in the COVID recovery. And on debate night was it 2 nights ago or last night, Kate Forbes was asked which party leader she would see as having positive attributes. And when she said Willie Rennie, my first reaction was, what? But she then went on to say that Willie Rennie was, at least on certain issues, trying to work constructively. So there is certainly, if we exclude the Tories, who seem to have nothing to offer apart from shouting and SNP bad and independents even worse, other parties, they appear to be able to work together. And so, I mean, again, that gives us, I think, hope that that really we will see a parliament, maybe a more diverse parliament. Who knows?
I would say that there are two different branches here, really. There's the constitutional question, and then there's everything else. On everything else, you tend to find that, yes, while there's friction, there's more of an ability to work together. It's when you get to the constitutional question, things become polarized between yes and no. And that's really where the issue comes into. But ultimately, what's going to decide that side of things is who has the majority in Parliament. As simple as that. But on terms of the everything else side of things, it comes down to, if you are unwilling to work with other people in that Parliament on policy and legislation to benefit the people of Scotland, then you've no business being a parliamentarian. So if a Labour guy comes to me, or a Lib Dem comes to me, or God forbid, even a Tory, and I say that because a lot of the Tory policies I will have nothing to do with. If they come to me with a genuine, this is going to benefit your constituencies, then as a parliamentarian, I would feel a responsibility to look it over. And if I saw it was going to be conducive, vote for it. Simple as that. If it's going to be conducive for the welfare of people, go for it. And I would hope that that same spirit would be reciprocated, regardless. I mean, I already have managed cross-party consensus in the Scottish Parliament without being elected. The Fourth Rail Link project, which I started, which is to reconnect services from Dunfermline to Glasgow via the old Long Annet railway line, which was a coal line that's been shut down since the power station shut down, was to convert that to passenger services so people from Fife could get on a train and go straight through, all the way through to Glasgow. That campaign I started in 2015. It got unanimous consent from all 5 parties at Holyrood at that time. They all backed it. The SNP added it to their manifesto. So I already have worked cross-party like this before, and it is possible. It is achievable if you don't go at each other like a bull in a china shop. On the question of the constitutional question, well, there's no doubt that's not something I'm willing to compromise on. That's a red line as far as I'm concerned. But with everything else, there's room for give and take there, as long as it continues to move down the route of it being beneficial for the people that are in Mid-Scotland and Fife. That they're the important things. They're the things that they're the people that need to be looked after. So if somebody comes to and as an independent, I have complete latitude to turn around and ask the question: is this going to benefit them? And if it does, I support it. Simple as that. For parties, it can be a little bit more difficult because of the party whip, but that's one of the great things about being an independent. You're free to make the choices based on the needs of the community and nothing else. So.
On that basis, again, Martin, a follow-up from me. If you're elected as an independent, you will effectively have a huge constituency. Mid-Scotland and Fife is big. Now, normal constituency MSPs, I say normal, are those elected to a constituency. I'll phrase it a wee bit better. They've got a relatively small constituency, a relatively small proportion of the electorate who they represent. For the list MSPs who have this party network behind them, obviously it's a lot easier because there might well be 2 or 3 of them. How would you aim to represent all your constituents for Perth to St Andrews as a one-man show?
Well, that's one of the benefits of the way the system works. It's not just a case of somebody has a single MSP across such a wide region. That you have the constituency MSPs and you have 7 regional MSPs as well. So it's really a case of the workflow, the inquiries come in, as they say, and from that point you then simply you churn away and you work at them one at a time. The one thing I will say is that I won't turn anybody away. I have no intention of turning around and saying, I'm sorry, I can't deal with that. If I know something, I will deal with it. If I don't know it, I'll damn well go out to try and find out exactly how to deal with it. In terms of the geographical area, well, Fife's mid Scotland and Fife it's a bit of a strange one. It tends to be the populations tend to be more centered into certain geographical areas, and they're easy to travel to. It's a challenge like anybody getting to know their constituency, but it's a challenge worth doing. I'm not going into this to do it half-assed. I'm not going into it to do it as a hobby or a second job, or I'm not going to be a referee for my first job and constituents for the job on the side. I'm going into this to do it mind, body, spirit. I'm going to throw my entire weight into it. Politicians, politicians, they like to say the words, it's an honour and a privilege and all that sort of stuff, and they're throwaway sound bites usually. But for me, I do classify it as an honour. I do classify it as a privilege if I was elected to that office. I have 100%, and it's been shown in the case that I've been fighting for the last year and a half. I have 100% faith in the sovereignty of the Scottish people. My view is, if I was elected, I work for them, not the other way around. So if they ask me to do something for them, you're damn well I'm going to try and do it. I'm not going to Parliament to simply kick up my heels and do it. I'm going there to try and make some real substantive differences. Some real substantive difference for the people of Mid Scotland and Fife. If I'm elected, I genuinely believe I can help. And I will manage as much as I possibly can as a human being, and just keep plugging along for them. I think that's all that can really be asked in this case. It is a big geographic area. There are a lot of people in it, but then again, there are support structures in place to assist, with being able to help as many people as possible. So.
I mean, you also were saying in your previous reply that you are looking to work with anybody who's willing to work with you. Yeah. Would that maybe also involve working together? For example, if a constituent came to you with a problem, you might say that another MSP might be better able to help, that you would maybe delegate, or would you be looking to say, the constituent came to me, I want to see this through to the end?
Of course, the first thing I'll always evaluate a problem based on skill set. So if the most appropriate place to put something, it's exactly what I do in terms of the DWP stuff that I do. If I'm able to help the person, I will help them there and then on the spot. If I'm not able to help them, I will go out to try and find the people that can help them. And when I say I'm willing to work with other people, I'm not just saying other MSPs. I'm talking about local charity groups, local authorities, local councillors. I've got quite a few friends of mine that are on the councils that are actually councillors. In fact, there's a councillor has endorsed me as an independent candidate in Fife. I will work with anybody that can assist me with helping my constituents. And if I am unable to deal with it myself, I don't have the skill set, or it's beyond my reach, I'm not proud. I'm not going to be prideful about it. If I believe there's another MSP that could help them better, if I believe that there's a civil servant that could assist this person better, or a charity or something like that, I will go to them and I will support. I will act in a supporting role to help them be able to do it. But I will delegate if I need to delegate. My only concern is getting the people that need the help that they need. That's it. I don't care how it's done, but I will find a way to do it, whether it be me or whether it be someone else. And if that means going to an MSP and saying, listen, I know your plate's full. I know that you have way too much work on your hands, but I have this constituent. I think you can help her better than I could. Could you please assist her? And I will take some of your workload in return, in order that she's the facilities that things are facilitated better for that person. And you know, I will take some of the workload from another MSP. I have no problem in doing that whatsoever. I just care that people get exactly the help they need. That's it. That's all that can really be asked of, you know.
Okay. Well, folk, we are coming up to the end of our hour, and again, in the interest of equality, the last two shows were also 1 hour, and we kept strictly to the timetable, so we won't be overrunning. Although, as you know, Martin, we could chat together for God knows how long. I mean, that would we'd be here tomorrow morning if we carried on chatting. Folk that are watching, first of all, thank you for joining us, and thank you for the questions that you've been putting to Martin. Also, thank you for the last couple of days when you've been watching us. It's been good. It's been hard work, but yeah, 3 nights, 3 different candidates, 1 and 1 for an hour. I think that's been a really good thing to do, and thank you that you've been joining us for it. The blether at the bar, as you're used to from the Wednesday night show, will happen after tonight's show. Probably about, I mean, we won't be too long, myself and Martin, after the show, so probably within about 5 to 10 minutes after we go off air, I'll post the link to the Zoom call onto the comments, and as always, come and join us for a wee blether about everything. We've spoken at the blether bar, we've spoken about fat bar, we've spoken about energy, we've spoken about politics. We can't get out of the pub. Well, in Scotland you can right now, but not after 8 o'clock, and not if you want to have a drink. You can do all that at the bar in about 10 minutes time. Martin, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Would you like to address a few final words to your potential constituents?
Potential constituents. I never thought I would hear myself uttering those words, that's for sure. Vote your conscience. That's all I'll say. It's not for me to decide who you vote for. It's for you to decide. Vote for your conscience. But don't vote one way just because somebody tells you to do that. Vote your principles, vote your conscience. And that's really all I can say.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Martin. And again, thank you all for joining us, not just tonight, but over the last 3 nights. Next Wednesday, it will be business back to normal. We'll have the People's International Chat Show at 8 o'clock Scottish time. And I'm quite sure we'll have another stellar panel for you, as we always try to do. We will see. Maybe just a quick point on the comments. Gwen Sinclair came in, I think, a bit late about the verdict in the Section 30. Yes, Gwen, we're expecting at least a ruling tomorrow in probably in the course of the morning. By lunchtime, I think we will know more. Okay, folk, that's it for tonight. Thank you all. Thank you, Martin. See you all next time, and stay safe, folk.